start today's session. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Mr. Ari Mochamad, again, Country Director of ICLEI Indonesia, to deliver his presentation. Mr. Mochamad, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Danang. So in my presentations, I'm not assuming that I will focus on the on SDGs itself, but also addressing on climate change and disaster risk reductions, because the tree of agenda is very important for global community in terms of how to prevent and how to save national developments. So next slide, please. Sorry, could you assist the presentation slide? Okay. Okay, so I'm starting from the report of IPCC report released 2018. I call the report is very important because they remind the global community that the climate change is happen and seriously impact on the community on Earth. So let me explain about the main substance of the report. So the report say that without a coherence and consistent policy and implementations in carrying it out, it will result in the sustainability of the future's developments. And then the report say the current and future challenges are the extent to which the implementation of program and activities achieve the targeted goals. So it means this is the pivotal for the leaders of the global, that without the serious response of us is impossible to get our goals in terms of achievement of development. So in a climate change adaptation action, so we know well that in terms of how to respond to climate change, we divide into adaptation and mitigations climate change. So in terms of adaptations, to what extent is it able to reduce vulnerability, and on the other hand, increase resilience? That is how the investment made are able to respond to low carbon development and the resilience of a regions and a country. This is a very critical for us, because in terms of the financing capability, how to get adaptation co-benefit and adaptation co-benefit, otherwise we have to think smartly when we implement adaptation in and mitigation in one place. So next slide. So of course, when we talk about the threat to sustainable development agenda, like I just a little short explains, the climate change has impacted the regions and resulted in irreversible impact. For example, economic, environmental, and health losses. This condition is compounded by the potential for conflict due to the struggle for desk resources and the increasing number of climate change refugees. So the statement I quote from the assessment report 5, because so many experiences in some places in much country, there is a conflict and between community and other communities, between communities and private sectors and communities and state. So it hinders the achievement of development targets in various fields. For example, poverty, hunger, and health, and even threatens the benefit of the development that has been achieved. And the last, of course, development must incorporate climate change adaptation and mitigation agenda I just mentioned, and encourage the ability of the two to work synergistically, because in terms of how to make efficient in terms of financing and budgeting. So next, please. So if we are looking at the cities, there is threat but an opportunity on the other hand. As a cities, everyone said that we are a main contributor, but of course, on the other hand, how to transitioning to game changers. So the data said 70% of greenhouse gas emission come from urban activities. Cities as a global hotspot of climate change. That's the report of UN Habitat. And the composition of Indonesia itself, we have a population living in the cities in 2020 based on the statistical agency said that projected to reach 56.7%, and in 2035 it will reach 66%. So currently the large proportion of the urban population live in the cities on Java and Sumatra. Meanwhile, outside the city of Java dominates the urban map in Indonesia. So of course, we know well that the urban pictures in most major cities in developing countries is characterized by pollution and air pollution, water pollution, air pollution that has exceeded emission limits and health standard. And of course, the reasoning of the problem. So cities are places that can be managed to contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emission and on the other hand, and more resilience. So when we talk about the globally, based on the report, 50% of the population will live in urban areas, which occupy only 3% of the total land area. Based on the report also said that in the next 25 years, the condition will be even more worrying for developing countries, home to 80% of the world population. So I think this is why we have to address on the issue and how dealing with the problem and how to reach and find the more solution and smart solutions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So the climate change in the context of the global agenda. We have UNFCCC, we have a Sendai framework, we have SDGs. So this three global agenda must be prepared and carried out by every local governments. The question is how to ensure that the three agendas, the three plans, are carried out effectively. It means no overlap, sufficient funding, and ensure that vulnerable and poorer are the beneficiaries. So next, please. So if you look at our Green Constitution, we call it as the Undang-Undang Dasar 1945. Sorry, this is wrong. 45. 1945. So we have the Article 8 that giving us the foundations in terms of the environmental management and how to protect the poor people and make sure that that economic can distribute well and fairness. So for example, in Article 28H, paragraph 1, this is result of the Amendment 4th. So I said that everyone has the right to live in physical and spiritual prosperity, to have a place to live, to have a good and healthy living environments, and have the right to obtain health services. And if we look at the Article 33, paragraph 4, say that the national economy is organized based on economic democracy and other principles, such as togetherness, with justice, sustainability, environmental insight, independence, and maintaining a balance of progress and national economic unity. This is the what we call as the Green Constitutions, and reflected in the notion of power and human right in the concept of economic democracy, including environmental. Because when we talk about the environmental, economic, and social are a part of the environment, we call it as the sustainable development. So encouraging the creation of environmental sound sustainable development. So based on the concept and the pillars, we elaborate into policies and regulations. And of course, policies and regulation we put on the big framework we call as the good environmental governance. Next, please. So if you look at the UNFCCC framework, so the last result of the Convention of Climate Change, we have a Glasgow Climate Pact. So the result of the COP 2023 in UNFCCC in Glasgow. So those are for a point that I quote. First, that the Glasgow Climate Pact acknowledging that climate change is a common concern of humankind. Parties should, when taking action to address climate change, respect, promote, and consider their respective obligation on human rights. The right to health, the right of indigenous people, local communities, migrants, children, persons with disabilities, and people in vulnerable situations, and the right to development, as well as a gender equality, empowerment of women, and intergenerational equity. And also the Climate Pact said nothings the importance for some of the concept of climate justice when taking action to address climate change. What is the climate justice? If I reverse to MIT, they said that climate justice is the principle that the benefit reaps from activities that cause climate change and the burdens of climate change impact should be distributed fairly. Climate justice also calls for the fairness in environmental decision making. So, and of course, in SDGs and climate change as well, we accept the principle of, with the jargon of principle, no one left behind. Leaving no one behind is overarching objective of the 2030 agenda and prerequisite for achieving the 70 SDGs. The principle implies targeting effort at a population experiencing multiple intersecting disadvantage linked to socio-economic conditions, governance mechanisms, and discriminatory policies, as well as reaching the farthest behind first. So the topic of human right in the climate change, what we are discussing now, the climate change policy framework and the SDGs has always been a concern, although it's not the main issue in preparing program and activity plans. However, this is my concern. Because they generally talk about this issue, they are often stuck on topic related to technology, financing, and studies or studies related to the scientific. In the end, the success of this issue plan is related to the problem of community literacy and other stakeholders, in particular, ensuring that all groups, especially vulnerable and poor communities, are protected from the threat of the climate crisis and different development agendas. So that's the basic of the foundations why we have to put priority about the human right. So next, please. So how do we work? Back to my organization, we have visions. So we have elaborated through 5 strategic pathways. Slide, please. Next slide. So first, the development pathways we call the low emissions. So low emission development pathways, we try drastically reduce all environmentally harmful pollutant and emission from heating, cooling, lighting, and food system, as well as reduce noise. So we will reduce our greenhouse gas emission in all our activities, especially in our transport, waste, and building sectors. So, and of course, in terms of the low emission development pathways, we also promote sustainable passengers and freight mobility, prioritize clean fuel policies, and electric vehicles from renewable energy where possible, and give priority to walking, cycling, public transit, and shared mobility as part of people-centered solution. And second, talking about nature-based development pathway. Nature-based approach to protect and enhance the biodiversity and ecosystem in and around our cities, which underpin key aspect of our local economies and upon which we depend for the well-being and resilience of our communities. So we also talking about the circular economy. Circular economy, it's mean that new models of production and consumption to build sustainable societies that use recyclable, shareable, and regenerative resources to a linear model of produce, consume, discard, and to meet the material development needs of growing global population. Of course, in terms of the communities, this is support new local economies that are productive and not extractive, where resources are exchanged and not waste, and of course, work with the business sector from early market engagement to the delivery of solutions that support local sustainability goals and that meet the needs of all citizens. And the other is resilience development, how we anticipate, prevent, absorb, and recover from shock and stresses, in particular those brought about by rapid environmental, technological, social, demographic change, and to improve essential basic response structures and function. And of course, prepare for new risks and impact taking into account the right and needs of vulnerable action of society. Last but not least, this is a very important for us in terms of the human right, equitable and people-centered development. To build more just, livable, and inclusive urban communities and addresses poverty, pursue processes and patterns of an inclusive development for all that safeguard the natural support system for human life, and of course, how to create and sustain human-centered, safe, and culturally vibrant communities where tangible and non-tangible cultural heritage activities are important assets. And of course, where diversity is woven into the social fabric. So talking about the next slide, please. So the complexity of the issue of climate change, DRR and SDG, of course, the scope of issue and agendas on climate change, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable development goals is broad and complex, strongly influenced by environmental, social, economic change and dynamic. Stakeholders and various interests are in it. Therefore, the issue of climate change is not only seen as an environmental problem, but also a development issue. So in the global community, we agree that when we talk about the climate change not only about environmental issue, but put as the development agenda. So that's why in terms of the climate change, SDG or DRR as well, we have to commit that the all sectors, all ministry, multidiscipline need sit together on how to figure out the problems.
Sorry,
and the fundamental question, because so many interests, so many actors. So the fundamental question that need to be answered clearly are: who is most affected by climate change or disaster caused by climate change? The other question: what steps have been taken to protect the most vulnerable groups? Sorry?
Yes, I'm very sorry, but you only have 3 minutes left. I'm very sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. 1 minute more. were the most vulnerable group involved in the program planning and the implementation? Is there any system that help them to engage effectively and efficiently? Is there support for economic and financial access to vulnerable group to help increase their resilience? Which group will benefit most from climate change policies or regulation? And so on, critical question. This is the critical question for us because based on my experience, how to bring vulnerable people, poorer community is a very relatively difficult in terms of the decision-making process. So the government or some NGO, quote unquote, only invite academic, NGO, private sector. So this is the critic for us, is autocritic for us. And of course, this is the challenge for us, how to put the vulnerable people, vulnerable group as the priority when we talk about the climate adaptation and mitigation as well. And of course, related to the sustainable development goals. Okay, that's all from me. Over to you, Mas Dana. Thank you. Mas Danang, unmute, please.
I'm very sorry. Yeah, I'm pretty new with the device here in the office, so yeah. Once again, I want to say thank you very much, Pa Ari, for the great presentation. And I do apologize that I need to cut your presentation, but then again, hopefully we could already get this the bigger picture of presentation that was delivered by Pa Ari. And now we have around 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A session. I'm not going to call out names, but then please don't put me in difficult positions. So if you have any questions for Pa Ari, please do so. You can write it in the chat box and we'll help you to read it to Pa Ari. But then if you can, just raise your hands and then you can ask your question directly to Pa Ari. The floor is yours, class of 2022. Okay, while waiting, apparently we already have question that was sent to us directly to the private chat. And the question is for you, Pa Ari, from one of the participants. So Pa Ari, as you mentioned, there is still a quite wide gap, especially in climate change / SDGs financing. So what is the role of local governments to narrow this gap? You're still on mute, sorry, Pa Ari. Yep,
yeah, the priority for the local government is make sure that they have prepare of SDGs or climate change or disaster reduction as their priority programs and how to adopt by local development plannings. And of course, they have to provide human resources, institutional and organizations. And of course, when we talk about the how to make sure that the program can implement well. So this is the challenge, how to look of the alternative of the innovation in terms of the financings, and of course how to collaborate and integration, communication integration, vertical between local government and national government. So this is the critical for the local government, and of course from the national government itself, this is the what we call is homework, how to make a good communication with the local government. Because when we talk the adaptation and mitigation, the most responsibility is local governments. Local government, on the other hand, lot of burden, lot of message from the national governments. What we call, name it, SDGs, DRR, climate change, other global agenda. So, but on the other hand, they have capacity in terms how to make a simple parameter, simple indicators, yeah, and the others how to get the financing to build institutional, to build a good human resources and infrastructure as well. So this is the critical for the local government. But of course, for the local government itself, they must be a good prepare in terms how to make a program effective and efficiency, not overlapping amongst agencies, and put the main priority based on scientific reasons. So this is the critical for the local government and national governments. And of course, for institutional funding, we have to look at carefully what we have to support what and where can we support the local governments, and wisely to distribute it and offering the program.
Okay, thank you very much, Pari. Now we already have 3 questions in the chat box. First is from Jasmine Regino from CHR Philippines. Pari, can you please elaborate on the circular pathways? Still on mute.
Okay.
Yep.
So circular economy or circular development. Sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So circular economy and development as the concept is not new. So 10 years ago, we have Noel, the program from the Ministry of Environment with a clean production and so on. So, but the problem in terms of the circular economy, we have to sure that the approach of environmental management not based on administrative matters, but we have to use the ecosystem or landscape approach. Because, for example, ICLEI we have a program in terms of circular economy in Bogor City. So the district of Bogor, we cannot live because when we talk about the circular economy, lot of industry in the district. So that's the critical for the local government, how to make multi-level governance and good communication with other neighbor. For example, so that's why in terms of the project Bogor, we put as the model, and Kabupaten Bogor or district put as the satellite. But when we talk about the huge project, this is the critical for the project, because if I'm speaking frankly, there is no best practices in terms of the circular economy. So that's why we have to make sure that first we have to identify the main sectors, and of course we have to sure that the local regulation or the national regulation support well about the system, and of course the lastly is make sure that the communication amongst agencies, among administrative is appropriate. So this is the lesson learned from our project in terms of the circular economy and or circular development.
Okay, thank you very much for the clear answer, Pa. And next question from Navaraj Sapkota. If we focus on the urgent action to combat climate change, what urgent actions can be taken by the local governments to combat climate change, especially from human rights-based approach? Because as you mentioned earlier, Ari, too many burden, quote unquote, homework for the local governments, but then unfortunately, usually there's not followed by sufficient resources as well. So yeah, please do, Ari, if you have any insights on this matter.
Yeah, for me, is pivotal for the local government to put climate adaptation is priority. Because when we talk about the climate mitigations, this is the global commitment. the global issue, but the impact of climate change is locally. So that's why the climate adaptation is very important for local governments. For example, based on the data from the BNPB, from the Disaster National Agency said 97% the climate crisis is happen now. So every year we can see floodings, landslide. That is the critical for the local government, how to protect and to save their development. So I think back to your questions, the climate adaptation is very important. So we have to seriously prepare, and of course, based on the scientific research, because on the other hand, we avoid the maladaptation. So and of course, in terms of the community, how to increase climate literacy. We can easily adopt regulation. We can easily adopt a new technology, but the problem is literacy, because at the end, the whole program we depend on community and back to the community. So literacy is a very important, and of course, how to make a good framework to bring community as part of the key actors in the decision-making process. This is the challenge, including for my organization.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Ari. And then luckily among this class of 2022, Pak Ari, we also have some participants who already have some experience in their respective cities in developing local adaptation plans. I believe in this room now we already have Leopold from Baguio City, Philippines, and Myra from Catbalogan City, Philippines. Maybe Leopold or Myra, if you have any other insights from your experience in Baguio, in Catbalogan, in developing local adaptation plans, please do share with us today all in this class. Because I think it would be a very, very good practical example for other fellow participants as well. Yes, Leopold, I see you already unmute your speaker.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now, Dana?
Very clear, very clear.
Hello?
Yep, we could hear you, Leopold.
Yes, I have a problem with my connection, but I hope I can get through with the audio of my connection. But would it be fine with you? I will just remove yet my video so that you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So thank you for the consideration. Yes. In the case of the city government of Baguio, we had different initiatives conducted over the previous years to promote knowledge on the climate change issue, and came up with different adaptation programs. We actually conducted different stakeholders meeting with the different sectors of the society. We had engaged with the various sectors like the students, like the civil society organizations, the academe, and with the different government agencies, for us to have a common understanding on what is the real concept and the impact of climate change in the city of Baguio. Yes, the city of Baguio is actually a mountainous city, and we actually experience the great impact of climate change. Before, we experienced a cool weather in the city of Baguio, on the average of 15 degrees to 20 degrees Celsius. But now, because of climate change, we are now experiencing around 20 degrees to 25 degrees. So there is an effect on the aspect of heat or higher temperature. And because of this, livelihood in the city of Baguio, I mean, has been greatly affected. A lot of people, especially the women's sector, their income has drastically affected because of climate change. And now we are integrating programs that would respond to the impacts or effects of climate change in relation to employment, and as well as other concerns as would directly relate to the very environment of the city of Baguio. So that is what I can share with you right now as regards climate change and its impact to the city of Baguio in relation to the goal number 5 of the SDG, which is on gender equality, and goal number 13 on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leopold. What I could highlight from your answer is that the very importance of multi-stakeholder and public participation for the whole process, and how the SDGs is actually interrelated, like for, just you mentioned earlier, like goal 13 with goal 5 as well, for example, with gender equality. So thank you very much for your insights. And maybe Myra, do you have anything to add from your experience in Catbalogan, especially how the city of Catbalogan could integrate the human rights-based approach in the process of development and review of the local adaptation plans? Do you have anything to add, Myra? Or maybe no, that's fine. Okay, so maybe we could move to the next question from Zaman Shahid from ESDO Bangladesh. I think it's very, very important question because it relates back to the first question on the financing gap. Less responsive private sector for financing climate change adaptation from their CSR fund. So, Pak Ari, what is your opinion on this matter?
Yes, the private sector is a main actor because based on the financial structural, only 20% budget coming from state. So the remains of budget is coming from private sectors. So this is the critical roles of the private sector engage of the climate change. Not about we are not talking about sorry, what? Corporate social responsibility. Sorry, corporate social responsibility. We are not talking about corporate social responsibility. We are talking about how to make sure that the businesses of the private sector is sustainable. So this is the critical why the private sector engagement is very important for discourses of the climate change. So that's why in some project we are aware a lot that the roles of the private sector is very crucial. So this is the critical for the, because based on the experiences, a lot of the climate crisis, climate emergency, in the end can reduce the income of the private sectors. So this is the critical for our organization also engage the private sectors. And of course, in terms of the private sectors, sometimes we look at the private sector is the what we call is the problem makers. But of course, on the other hand, the private sector is part of the solution. So that through the innovation, the green technology, and of course, when we talk about the social entrepreneurs now, because so many youth, millennial generations talking about the social enterprise. This is the good momentum, how to bring green technology, green investment, green development is a must for us. So I really agree, but of course when we talk about the perspective of national government, we have to make sure that the good scheme, economic scheme, how to encourage the private sectors actively talking about the climate change is crucial. So that's from my side.
Thank you very much, Pak Ari. Yeah, I think it's very important, as you mentioned earlier, the involvement of private sector, not just in terms of their ability to disperse CSR, but then I think now and in the future for the trend is how to actually really instill and integrate sustainability into the core business. And now I think in terms of innovative financing. I think it's a way to go as well. Like for example, with impact investment and any other, and PPP as well, just to mention a bit. So I think the options are there. It's just how the local governments then could have the capacity to tap all those.
Let me add, Dana.
Yes,
Let me add that now. In
please.
terms of the financing management, this is the crucial for the government and of course for us also. How to manage the all money collect from the donors, because sometimes we can effectively how to distribute and manage the money, and how to measure that the money have a good impact on the project. So that's the critical for our forums. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you very much for the addition, Pari. And we have a last question from Dewi Satyaji, Semarang, Indonesia. Can you give us the example how government can make a policy that support climate change with human rights-based approach? I think I will park this question because this is closely related, Bu Dewi, with our next session on the reflective questions. And in a way, I think we could already get some sense from what Leopold just shared with us. But then I think we could go back to this question in the next reflection session. So thank you very much for all the questions. And now we could move to the reflective sessions, as I mentioned earlier, with these two questions. Yeah. First is on based on your experience, professionally in your respective cities, and from your experience in following the modules, the last two modules, Introduction to Human Rights and the linkages between human rights and SDGs, where do you see SDGs and human rights converging in your city? And the next question, what is a particular project that has or could in the future work toward the SDGs and improve human rights of residents? So I think we'll start with the first question. So from your experience in the last few weeks and based on your previous professional experience as well, how or where do you see the SDGs and human rights to converge in your city? Maybe while you think and reflect back on your experience, maybe I believe in the class you still have. Oh, Arlene, sorry, Sage RP. Yes, Arlene.
Hello, yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think in my residential city, in Naga City, our city has converged when it comes to SDG number 2 on the right to food, zero hunger. Because, you know, during the pandemic, especially during the first month wherein there was a lockdown, people were particularly problematic when it comes to where do they get the food, especially if the people are only earning money from hand to mouth, meaning on a daily sustenance basis. So if they will be on a lockdown for a 1 month period, then they cannot buy food in bulk because they have to earn the money on a daily basis. So with this, one of the projects that was undertaken by the local government unit was to create the so-called market on wheels, because there we have the farmers on one hand who does not know where to bring their produce, as people were not allowed to go out of their residence and purchase food, so it may go to waste and they will not be earning an income. And we have on the other hand people who do not know where to get their sustenance since they have limited money. So the local government unit, through their market on wheels, they bring the market produce to the different communities on a scheduled basis. So there's a particular schedule for the week. So aside from giving the farmers the opportunity to earn income, although on a small profit, but at least their produce does not go to waste, while giving also the people the opportunity to purchase their produce at a lower value, and at the same time giving them the opportunity to provide for the sustenance of their family while observing the social distancing that is being required during pandemic. So I think the local government should also be prepared for instances like this, because I don't think that any local government, for that matter, can sustain a prolonged necessity to keep on providing for the sustenance of the people in their communities. I think the people, the government, the local government and the people should work together in order to have a win-win situation for both parties. That's all.
Thank you very much, Arlene. Thank you very much for a very, very great explanation. And hopefully it could inspire the other participants as well, especially on how it relates to their respective cities. And I think it's a very, very great example as well to see that how, again, SDGs cannot be achieved in silos, because you mentioned earlier that it directly correlates with zero hunger, but then how I see it, also closely related with goal 12 on responsible production and consumption as well, right? So because food waste and those kind of issues as well. So once again, thank you very much, Arlene, for a great examples from your city. From other participants, do you have any other insights maybe, or maybe from your experience, how SDGs and human rights could converge in your city? Yes, we have Daya Sagar Shrestha.
Thank you. Just I want to share the experience of Nepal.
Yep.
Social security program. Social security program is very popular in Nepal. Actually, this is the program which is implemented by national government, but the local governments are made responsible to implement that program at the local level. Actually, that is directly related with social security. What is happening that, the local governments are providing social security allowances to the older person, widows, single women, person with disabilities, and the children, the children below 5 years, the Dalit community, which is one of the marginalized community in Nepal, so we can also interlink the SDGs and human rights with this program. SDG goal number 5, there is clearly mentioned about the social protection and the social security and the economic, social, cultural rights. Under economic, social, and cultural rights, we also see the security. Social security is social protection, social security. They are, one of the human rights mentioned as human rights. So those things are, being, implemented by the local level in the whole country. So we can interlink it, the SDG and human rights in this way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daya, for sharing with us on the social security programming in Nepal and how it actually become the manifestation of SDGs and human rights in practice. So last one, we have Stephanie Tan from Katbaloga. Maybe if you can share a very brief because of the time limitation. Yep,
yes, can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. For Catbalogan City, I see SDGs and human rights converging, specifically in one of our. We have a lot of projects in localizing SDGs, but before it's not common for all local government units, or it's not common for us to actually consider all our projects as human rights based approach. And because of this program, it really deepens my understanding on how do we go about, or how do we think or plan about our projects. Then I realized that our basic, or the main reason why we should do our or plan for our projects is actually the human rights, the rights of everyone. So in our future projects, because we have a lot of projects ongoing, especially localizing SDGs, but we have this upcoming project which is establishing a center, and establishing we should go to college, or the right for education or college education. And even if the national government is actually saying that we have an education for all, but we can still feel that for college students, our state universities do not accept average people. You know what I mean? They need students who have high grades or high intellectually. They're high in their grades and intellectual capacity, and so we believe that everyone should go to college. So we are now establishing. We are about to establish our own city college that will actually cater even those who's not good in academics, but who still have the right to education. Also for dialysis center, for our establishment of dialysis center, because of the health conditions of the people, there are a lot of limitations for them to actually get or undergo dialysis. They have to go to other cities or other municipalities or other capital cities or big cities just to get this treatment. And we believe that for every good health and well-being of everyone, we give importance to this. And so we want to put up our own city hospital and our own dialysis center. There are a lot. I believe that all our projects and programs and other local governments are actually into a lot of consideration, especially to SDGs and human rights. But for me, these are the two projects that I believe that we can actually improve the human rights of our residents. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much, Stephanie, because you already covered the second question as well on the particular project. And I think from what you've shared, it could be very useful for you and other Catalogan participants as well, especially for the course project later in the module. And I really like your point how actually you guys already have done lots of projects and programs at the city that cater the SDGs and human rights, but then not necessarily identify it as a HRBA, for instance, because as the saying goes that fish is the last to discover water, right? So sometimes I believe that we already conduct this HRBA to some extent maybe, but then maybe we haven't tagged it in such way using that particular term of HRBA. So once again, thank you very much, Stephanie. So because of the time, I only got 1 minute, but then I want to give one more opportunity for the participants, especially to answer the second question. Maybe do you have any other insight, especially on the particular project that has been going on, or maybe a future project that already maybe still in your ideas, for example, that work toward SDGs and also improving human rights for the residents of your respective cities. The floor is yours, participants, especially maybe class of 2022. Do you have any ideas? Because this will be very, very useful for the course project later in the modules. Yes, Dewi from Semarang, Indonesia. Because this is your question as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. Maybe the second question about what is the particular project that have in Semarang City works toward the SDGs and improve the human rights of residents. Maybe I have like some examples. Like maybe we know that we must have the law first for the local regulation that give the protection and right fulfillment person with disabilities, like that one. We have it in 2021. And then like for gender mainstream too, we have the law. And then maybe some example, maybe you know that we already know that in Semarang, known well about the Rainbow Village that well known in our popular in 2017. Yeah, the government with the resident in the village make like change the slum area or slum village into beautiful village that by painting all the house and make socialization and give education to residents to open the business like such as stalls or photo service, and then the boat rental service that make the tourism, so it will give many or bring the tourists there. And then the government of Semarang make universal health coverage too, which is this one. The government pay the health insurance for the resident with which one that have the Semarang ID cards. That one's I think this one for free access for the health service. So it means in the Semarang city, we don't have to pay for the health services. This is free from the government. And then for the education, in SDGs, we know that education is one of the goals. We give the free education from kindergarten kindergarten, primary schools, and then until junior high schools. Actually, this is not just for the public schools, but also for the private schools. So maybe we have like all of them 44 kindergarten that free, and then 370 primary schools that free too for the education, and then 80 junior high schools in Semarang that free education for the residents. And then maybe for the small business or small enterprise, we got like a cheaper credit for small enterprise. It means maybe this one the lowest interest rate in just 3% of the for a year, and without collateral. So it can give to small enterprise that wants to have like a budget for make a small business. This one maybe just some of the experience that have worked in Semarang city.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Devi. And I want to highlight one thing from your experience, that how Semarang City could use both top-down and bottom-up approach. Like, for example, top-down using a policy framework, and bottom-up community-based, of course, like, for example, the Rainbow Village that you mentioned earlier. And I saw as well a very, very last participant, Leo, that you raised your hand earlier. Do you have anything to share, especially on the project? You can turn off your...
Yes, actually, right now.
Yep.
Okay. Actually, right now, we are into the process of harmonizing our gender and development programs to properly respond, and at the same time categorize how these development projects are actually benefiting women in terms of the impact of these projects. So we are using the framework of harmonizing gender and development programs to determine the what they call this one, the viability of these projects in relation to the financial requirements, or in reference to the correlation of this project to further the welfare of women, on how they will benefit from the project. So we are into the categorizing how much would be earmarked, or how much budget would be attributed to this development program, so that on the process of monitoring and evaluation, we could actually determine how these programs responded to the welfare of women. So the welfare of women, which includes their rights. Okay. So that is one of the programs or strategies that we are now undertaking, and this is actually integrated in our planning and budgeting processes.
Thank you very much, Leo, for mentioning about the gender budget tagging / gender responsive budgeting as well, because as we know, like, gender is a cross-cutting issue. So thank you for that. And unfortunately, it's already 3:06. So thank you very much for all the insights and the questions. Personally, I learned a lot today in around 60 minutes. And I should say that congratulations, Windy. I think you have a very, very promising class of 2022. Yeah, congratulations. A very, very thought-provoking discussions, a very, very thought-provoking questions. And don't forget, next week, you guys are gonna have another online discussion, and then another online discussion for the last one in August. Okay, and don't forget to keep looking into the modules and doing the assessments, and because hopefully that what will be discussed in the next online discussion. And for the details of the next online discussion, I think Windy will contact you guys through email as usual. And thank you very much, especially for Mr. Ari Mochamad for the great presentations, and for all the advisors, class of 2022, and last but not least, and of course, the alumni of the BLC in the previous batch. So thank you very much, and hopefully I could see you guys again next week. Bye. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mbak Windy. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you,
Thank
Arlie.
you.
Thank you, Mas Dana.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you everyone.
Thank you, Tauhid.
Thank you,
Terima kasih
everyone.
semuanya. Thank you everyone. Izin live ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you also, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you. Thank you.